this is something I kind of been wanting to, I don't know, throw out there for a second. And, several of my close friends know about it, and not everybody does, but, maybe some people have heard it through the grapevine that I did a DNA test and found out as an adult that the dad that I grew up with thinking was my dad my whole life is not. And how that happened, it's really interesting. My real dad is in my life now, which is amazing. And, really crazy story. He lives in Hollywood. He's a stuntman, actor, blah, blah, blah. But the cool thing was while I was doing the DNA test, my wife gave it to me for my birthday one year. And while I was doing the DNA test, I told her, because it takes, a little while to come back after you do the test. Let me turn around this way. I think this probably looks cooler. So I took the DNA test, and it takes a little while to come back, and it was taking a while, and I was thinking, man, wouldn't it be awesome, or really great if someone else was my dad, and I found him, and he was a great guy, and, I could connect some pieces together and stuff. I was just thinking that to myself, and then I told my wife, what do you think about this? What if, Chuck, the guy that I grew up thinking was my dad, isn't my dad? And she was, intrigued by that kind of thinking. And when I got my test back, I think she opened it first, and she got excited about it, and she was like, guess what? You got a different dad. And, so many things flooded through my mind. My mother passed in 2013, so I couldn't, say anything or talk about it with her and ask her any questions. And, which is a bummer, Sorry, I was looking. Oh, here it is. I was going to put this up there. That's my mother, Betsy Jones, and her mother. Both of them were passed away when I found out about the dad sitch. So, I'd been, growing up my whole life, and they told the story, each of them had their own version, I guess, of, where and how I was conceived and so forth. But, things didn't connect as a kid for me all the way, because my mother grew up in a really nice family. Her dad was a television director and producer, and he ran Channel 11 in Houston for a little bit. But she came from a really good family, and my dad, or Chuck, did as well. But along the way in his situation, his real biological father was killed in a plane crash, and I think he was carrying oil parts in the plane back and forth to Louisiana, I think, for Hughes Oil. But every bone in his body was broken when he crashed the plane and died. And this was in, Chuck was 7 years old, so in the 50s. And his mother remarried her boss, who had means and was able to take care of 3 boys, my dad and his 2 brothers. Him and his brother, his oldest brother, ran together. And his oldest brother was super out there, at a very young age. He was a really dangerous guy. And where that came from, I don't know. But anyhow, that being the case, his brother ended up, being a a shot caller in Huntsville. And so when Chuck, who was my dad, violent guy, he had a armed robbery was his thing. So when he went to prison, and just before, when I was after I was conceived, 69, he was able to go to Huntsville, and his brother was a shot caller, so he was golden, even though he was on the what would have been called, I guess, the Gladiator Farm or the Pea Farm back then, which I think it really was a pea farm, because they in prisons they used to really work and make something happen. But anyway, sorry for the ADHD moment. That's what I do. I do that a lot. But I'm going to go back to the story. So anyway, I found out as an adult who my dad was, and it was a really interesting evolution in my thought process. I started growing in my mind really quickly, trying to piece things together, and when things that I remembered from my past and why it happened, I thought, oh man, that's the missing link right there. And it healed that little section. And I don't know if that makes any sense to you. If you're in a situation where you don't know who your dad is, or maybe you could, you go through the Ancestry.com process and find out your dad is somebody else, which I have. It's so weird because I don't know if birds of a feather always flock together, but it's really weird that I've met so many people that, similar circumstances have happened, and some of them are great and some of them aren't so great, or they're left with more questions. I was blessed in mine, because in mine, and the story is hilarious. I really should get my wife and see if she would, I don't know, do a talk with me or something, because she's so much more detailed, and I'll tell you the story and she'll say, oh no, it happened this way, but this is the way I remember. And I'm going to give you just the quick version here. Is I found out that it was another person, and then my wife and what's called a DNA angel, this beautiful girl that really is intrigued by this kind of stuff, and just taught my wife, along the way how to do things or what to look for and things like that. And then they worked together, and then they narrowed it down to two people who it could be. And before I tell you that, though, I'll go back and I'll tell you that my mother, now just remember, she passed in 2013. My grandmother has passed, and because because Chuck was such a violent and scary guy growing up, the rest of her sisters, my mother's sisters, everybody kind of avoided him, and stayed away from him. They liked him when he was fun, at first. They didn't realize what a party guy he was and how seriously involved he was in crime, and violent or, scary stuff. Anyway, so they kind of stayed away from him. So there's no way for me to actually know, or ask them about the details. Chuck, I got him to do a DNA test before he passed. He passed not too long after that. We can tell you the story on that too, which is really interesting. Coming back from Louisiana, it's a split second decision because I was estranged from him, he had done some things and acted some ways in front of, his grandkids and me and my wife. And it was too much, it was kind of like, all right, back to Orange, Texas, which is where he was living. And he was working for this guy every now and then, Del Sasso, which is like a big name down there. And they really liked each other, and he was doing well in the last part of his life, but and not so well. As far as we know, he had a drug addiction up until he passed. But that being said, let's go back a little bit. So there's nobody to talk to. There's nobody to really, say this did happen, or this is why this happened, or I can't ask my mother other than just thinking about what would her reaction be, other than just total shock and disbelief. And here's the thing, growing up, my mother's 5, probably 3, and Chuck was 5, like 4 or 5'5". I mean, just really short people. So, and I'm 6'2", and I'm over 300 pounds. My dad is not. He's 6'2". He's just like me. He's got the same. We got the same smile. It's eerie, but beautiful. And so he's a rail. He's in really good shape. He moves around a lot. Lives in California, so enjoying that California weather. And that California crime right now, man, God, it's bad. But anyway, so here we are, not able to talk about this with anybody other than just, chit-chatting with the family and just letting them know, hey, this is what happened on my mother's side of the family. My dad's side of the family is just a whole nother, or Chuck's side of the family, there was a cog in the whole wheel of that family. I mean, I'm sure that things function just fine, without me in their lives. But I feel like, it would have been a blessing. I would have been a blessing to them, and they could have, we could have traded that, but that didn't happen. So after Chuck passed, it was pretty much, after that last, after the, little sit down we had at this dinner place in this Italian place here in the Woodlands, it was kind of like, you just knew that this is probably the last time we're going to see each other, which is, and then everybody seemed fine with that, I guess, but weird. Anyway, so, and maybe they speculated all the time, which is kind of why they, didn't care to know me. Who knows? It's hard for me to know. I know that Chuck didn't know because he asked me after he took the DNA test. He asked me, why'd you want me to take this DNA test? He told me he had a dream and everything and he said, are you trying to find out if I'm your dad? And man, that was a difficult question to ask because I already knew at that time that he wasn't. And but I did it because he was the guy. He had said before that he wanted to find out about his Indian roots. His grandfather was half, or his mother. No, his granddad was half, I want to say Comanche or something, Cherokee or Comanche, but, and so he wanted to know about his roots because he would be, the right amount to receive whatever and, be recognized as a Native American, which he did get his DNA test back. There was some, but not much. I don't even remember what it was. But, which is really weird how the DNA tests come back. It tells you from certain regions and it pinpoints stuff, but it changes over time. If you go back into Ancestry.com, it actually changes, But anyway, he wanted to research that. So I told him, I just said, well, I remembered you, wanting to know about your ancestors, which is true. And I danced around it. And that may have been close to the last conversation we ever had, because my wife and I went to Vegas and came back for our anniversary to meet up with her brother. and his wife and kids, and we all celebrated together. And then when I came back, can't remember if it was while I was on vacation. I think it was when I came back, I found out that Chuck had died, and a peaceful death. There, it's this Spindletop place in Orange. Anyway, so I knew at that time who my dad was. We had already connected. When they pulled it down to the two people, I said, well, my wife showed me who they were and everything, and I said, well, it's definitely not that guy. And that's who it was. Because I couldn't tell at the time, really. And my wife had pulled up a commercial that he was in and stuff like that. And I said, that's not him. But it's so funny. And then and then finally, when we did narrow it down to him, and so we sent him a letter. We actually sent a letter to both of the people we thought it was. The first guy was not thrilled. He was, and he was there. That family is and was going through a lot at that time, and this would have, if it would have been him, there would have been major issues, I think, inside their family. But I'm glad that I didn't cause that. That's the fear of us finding out that there's another family, there's another dad, there's another mom, or whatever. Your fear is that you're not going to be received. Even if you've said in your head that I'm not going to care what these people say if it's negative. That's not true. You can play it off, but it's not true. You really want that connection, and that's what I wanted. I was blessed to get that connection with my dad, and able to, when I first talked to him, he said, well, hey, I hear that you're looking for your dad. And I told him the story, and I already sent them the letter and everything, and he goes, well, where do you want to go from here, And I said, well, if I could I send you the DNA test and you just do it, and just to, verify things. That'd be a really sweet thing. And he was 100% for it. So I sent him the test, and then he called me one day while I was working and said, well, hey, son, and it's so funny because, in the industry that he's in, he was a bachelor for a really long time. So when he finally married the woman of his dreams, he was an older adult, and he said, and he told his wife and kids when they were growing up, there may be more out there. Maybe, you might not be the only ones, anyway, that was a funny story. Anyway, so I guess I just wanted to get on camera and talk and kind of give you a little talk, give myself a talk, and maybe I'm going to watch this and delete it, or maybe I'm going to post it. We'll see. So, I haven't revealed who my dad is to you guys, or really who Chuck was and to me yet. And I should probably do that. I should probably do just like a little segment on dads, because, whether you have a good dad or a bad dad, or you don't have the dad that, you thought you had growing up, we all have the choice and the opportunities to look at the positive side of things. And it's really hard for a kid in traumatic situations where they're in fear for their life, or they're taken advantage of physically or mentally. It's hard for them to break out and to kind of grow properly. And what I mean by that is where your conscience grows with you. You're not acting out and doing things that embarrass yourself or make you feel ashamed, and things like that. And so maybe I'll do a segment on dads and how this is shaping me, and give you a little bit of background on you know, on why I was glad to find out that Chuck wasn't my dad. Now, Chuck wasn't all bad. He was very, very talented. He was extremely good looking, Hollywood good looking. But he figured out how to, because he knew some really bad people, you know, in gangs and stuff like that, and at a very young age. Because he had enough what he would call snap to manipulate the leaders of those gangs until he would get in trouble. Because he had that kind of knack or whatever. He had like a salesman's talent. I mean, if he just would have used it in the right direction. And that's the whole thing, like with my family, you know, on my mother's side, everybody always had hope that he would change and blah, blah, blah. But then when he went to prison at such a young age, they weren't going to accept him into their fold at all, you know, period, which they never did. And he was in and out of my life as it, you know, even after he came back from prison the first time, the second time, I watched him get arrested in our driveway as a kid. I mean, another traumatic experience. And that one wasn't for a violent crime, but because he was, you know, so bad off and had just so many assaults and, you know, with the aggravated, what do they call it? They call it, back then they didn't call it aggravated assault. They called it assault with a deadly weapon, I think. And I'll tell you in my next video, if I can remember to do that, about how he would rob people and stuff, and how he had this, actually Houston Police Department had a shotgun squad that was built directly to catch him because he was robbing all the Pilgrim cleaners around Houston like it was a route. That's another story for the next video. Anyway, thank you guys. I've never asked anybody to like or subscribe, but I guess I'd like you to do that just to see if maybe there's other people out there that kind of like what I'm jibber jabbering about. All right, I'm out.